Hello, I'm Lindsay from Game Digits, and I'll be going through the making of Love Panic for the Love Bytes VR Game Jam. This is day 1. So the first thing to do is to check over the jam page and make sure you know all the rules and everything. Next up is to make a folder structure so you can easily find everything. It's good to separate out the project from the source art and the references and documents. I also make a Trello board so I can keep track of the tasks. I start the project with an existing Unity VR framework and then take out any folders that are project specific. So the criteria for voting on this jam are enjoyment, aesthetics, sound design and the use of theme. It's good to check now and again during development to see how you're doing on these. Also, the theme was Stages of Love, which was quite a tricky one to keep within the scope of a week. First of all, I needed to think of some ideas, so let me just get my notepad. No, wait a minute, it's not the 80s. Let me just load up Notepad and type up my ideas instead. That's more 90s at least. For me, I don't touch the project now for a few hours. I just think, trying to come up with concepts and ideas and mechanics that would fit the theme, trying to play them through in my head. I try and jot down at least 5 ideas to start with, which I then whittle down to 2, and then I consider the scope and the criteria and everything, and then I settle down on one final idea. In this case, the idea takes place in a restaurant or a cafe, and the player uses a machine to make things, in order to win the hearts of potential partners, just like in real life.
What?
So anyway, I started with a framework I made, which is a small extension on top of the XR Interaction Toolkit, which allows some basic interactions and grabbable objects, just to start with. The next step was to box out the environment, so I just put temporary boxes around the place for tables and walls, just to get a feel and scale of the place. I also added some temporary characters that I will model properly later. For this idea, I needed to show the level of interest that a character has. For this, I drew a heart and a separate outline so it can be filled up. So all these grumpy guys now have a lovely little heart. They also need to think, so I created a think bubble above their heads and scripted the logic so that different objects can be shown in their bubble. This indicates to the player what the character wants at a particular time. I also created an animation and script to show different images for different needs the characters may have. So let's test this out. I've created 2 options so far, a yellow box and a red box. Each have a different transform name, so when it's placed into the socket, it checks the name to see if it matches the thought name. It will then increase the heart level if they match. Exciting stuff. Next up is to create the machine itself, and I want it to have dials so that you can select certain elements and combine them together to make a specific object. I then made a script for the machine to make mesh combinations. So it will take the dial values and replace meshes from a prefab with some default Unity shapes and then colour them. I then put several dials together and a button to spawn the prefab. The machine logic then replaces the meshes in the prefab. As you can see here, turning the dials can make lots of different mesh combinations. Another step was to update the thought logic, so it queried the mesh maker in the machine to give random possible combinations that the machine can create. So there we have it, end of day 1. There's a machine that has dials that can create different mesh combinations, which have specific transform names depending on what elements were used to create it. The characters have thoughts, which queries the machine logic to give it a random combination and transform name. The socket on the characters then check for this transform name and increases or decreases the heart level accordingly. Thank you for watching day 1 of the Love Panic devlog. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again for day 2.